Perimeter of squares and rectangles. Well, before we can do perimeter of squares and rectangles, we have to know, what is perimeter? The perimeter is the distance around an object. So let's look at the soccer field and talk about perimeter. I've got a soccer field. I know that this way it's 50 yards, this way it's 100 yards. I also know it's a rectangle. And the very special thing we know about rectangles is that it has one set of sides that are the same and another set of sides that are the same. So I don't need to know the measure on this side or this side because I know the measure on these sides, which automatically tells me since these are the same, this side's 100 and this side's 50. So perimeter, back to perimeter. It means how far is it around this soccer field? So if I was going to walk around this soccer field, however far I walked the perimeter of the soccer field. All right, so let's figure it out. What is the perimeter of my soccer field? Okay, again, we've got 100 yards, 50 yards. We don't need to know these two side lengths because we know, since it's a rectangle, that this is 100 yards and this is 50 yards. So we already have all the information that we need to know. So the next thing we need to know is, how do we do it? Well, there's a more complicated way that may seem easier, but it really takes a lot more work. We could add up all the sides. So if I'm walking, I walk 100 yards, then I walk 50, then I walk 100, then I walk 50. And I could add all of that up, which would be 50 plus 100 plus 50 plus 100. And I could add all that together and get 300 yards. Or I could use a pretty simple formula, which is the perimeter formula. The perimeter of a rectangle equals 2 times the length, because we know these two sides are the same, plus 2 times the width, because we know these two sides are the same, and that will give us the answer to perimeter of a rectangle. And the shortened formula for that is 2 times L times 2 times L plus 2 times W equals perimeter. We've just replaced the word length and the word width with the L and the W, so we don't have to write as much. There's also a formula for squares, because squares are kind of like a rectangle, but a little bit different because all 4 of their sides are the same. So we don't have to do all this. All we have to do is multiply the one side length, because it's the same as all the other side lengths, and multiply it by 4, because there's 4 sides. And the shortened version of that is 4 times S for side equals perimeter. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Here I've got a rectangle. It's 5 feet by 3 feet. I don't need to know these side lengths because it's a rectangle, and we already know this is 3, this is 5. So we could do it the long way. We're walking around 5 feet plus 3 feet plus 5 feet plus 3 feet. And I've got all that written here, and that would equal the perimeter. But we can see we have 2 5s. So we can just put those together and do 2 times 5. And we've got 2 3s, so we could just put those together and do 3 times 2. So this is 2 times length plus 2 times width equals our perimeter. And then we solve. 2 times 5 is 10, 2 times 3 is 6. When I add them together, I get 16 feet. Let's look at one more. I've got 4 inches and 6 inches. These are obviously not drawn to scale. Okay, I could walk around 4 inches plus 6 inches plus 4 inches plus 6 inches, and that's what I have down here. And yes, that will give me the perimeter. But I could do it much simpler, and I know I've got 2 4 inches, so that's 4 times 2, 2 6 inches, so that's 6 times 2. So I've got that down here. 2 times length plus 2 times width equals perimeter. 2 times 4 is 8. 6 times 2 is 12. Add them together, and that gives me 20 inches. Okay, now let's look at squares. Squares, pretty much the same thing, just a little bit simpler. Okay, I could take a walk around my square, and I know that all 4 of these sides are 3 feet. So I could take a walk, 3 feet plus 3 feet plus 3 feet plus 3 feet, which is what I have here. Or I could use the formula and know that I've got 4 threes, which would be 4 times 3. So here's my formula, 4 times side. I know my side is 3 feet. Do the math, 4 times 3 equals 12 feet. Here's another example, 6 centimeters. I could take a walk, 6 centimeters, 6 centimeters, 6 centimeters, 6 centimeters. 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6. Or I could know that with the repeated addition, that is simply 4 times 6, which is 4 times side. 4 times 6 equals 24. And here I've made a very common mistake that you are going to make also, but we have to make sure we don't. And we will talk about that on the next slide. I forgot my unit of measure. Okay, so the mistake I just made, make sure you don't. Stop. Don't forget. Perimeter is a measurement. Your answer must always include a unit of measure. If you do not include a unit of measure and you tell me that the perimeter of your rectangle is 5 what? Is it 5 miles? Is it 5 feet? Is it 5 inches? Those are very, very different answers. So you have to make sure that you always put a unit of measurement or your answer is wrong, because 5 inches is nowhere near the same thing as 5 miles. All right, here's a few examples I want you to try on your own and bring to class tomorrow with questions.